Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. We have a full house. I think this is one of the few times this has happened where all four geeks can make it in. I'm your host, Ray Alvarez, a.k.a. Nerd Numbers. We have our normal producer, Brian Foster, the voice of God. Okay, Patrick, I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite movie snack? Patrick Minton, NBA geek, tell us your favorite movie snack and say hey.
My favorite movie snack is peanut butter M&Ms. Hey, people.
That's good. Okay, and then second co-host, you called yourself a Tyson Chandler role player. I don't know if I agree with that, but Andrew Sutton, same question, favorite movie snack?
It's a Skittles and Twizzlers combo.
Ooh,
that's good. That's good.
That's good. I've never done that.
That's a mix of hard and mushy doesn't sound all that great, to be honest.
It's really tough on the jaw, but it's really good.
All right. Well, anyway, the whole reason I did that is usually every single co-host on this show, Dave Barry, Andrew Sutton, Patrick Minton, every time I say introduce yourself, you give like a one-word thing. So I'm going to start asking questions like that. You guys did awesome. Those were both amazing. All right. Well, we kind of have a mismatch. This week's show is not really directed. I know March Madness is about to go on. There have been some previous years where like Arturo's put up bracket data. I know he did that on his Twitter feed, so I'll make sure to link that along. Not as huge there, but we've left a spot to talk that. And then we just have some kind of mismatched thoughts based on an article I put up this week and then a few email threads. And then, of course, the Warriors are going to come up on the show because Brian's a big Warrior. Homer, we were big on the Warriors. I'm going to throw a throwback. Every year, Patrick goes to Vegas and throws some bets down. Sometimes he does. They look really good after the first month. I will give us.
It looked great after the first month. Yeah.
I was debating doing that as an article. Patrick is going over your portfolio and saying, "Here's how it looked after month 1, month 2," but everything's fallen apart.
Oh yeah.
You did a check-in on it, and then one of the few things we had going was if the Warriors can win over 66 games, but then lose to the field, they're fine. And then of course Kevin Durant goes down, so the Warriors over 66 is probably out the door.
But then again, those field bets got better.
The field bets did, in fact, get better.
And Durant may be back for the finals as well.
Well, it's weird that the Vegas odds have not changed on them to win the finals.
That would hurt, Brian. So that would mean they wouldn't win 66 games.
Oh, that's what I'm getting at. That's, I think, a more likely scenario now.
So basically, just the exact raw. Patrick wanted the alternative, which is
that's bullshit. No, clearly, them finishing lower in the regular season has to affect their chances of winning it all.
But
regardless of whether Durant's back or not.
Anyway, but I'm saying Kevin Durant being back has to be a better outcome for them winning the finals than him not. I think we'd all agree on that, right?
Well, sure, but I'm just saying, like, because of this, they're probably going to be the number 2 seed instead of the number 1 seed, right? And so, clearly, not having home court advantage all the way through makes it better to take the field against them.
And by the way, let's actually just start with Warriors, Brian. Sorry to pull an audible on you like that. I've got plenty of talk. I'll hog the mic on my own subjects towards the end anyway. But so Warriors, we talked about rest. There was one of the I didn't watch it. Was it a good game, Brian? It was basically the Warriors D-League team versus the Spurs D-League team. How'd that go?
I liked it better than Andrew and Patrick are shaking their heads right now. And Patrick, just to let you know, you're hovering above my head right now on the screen, so it's kind of funny. But I mean, you're right. It was. It didn't go well for the Warriors. They got destroyed. And I have to say, the one observation I had about this game is the Spurs starting lineup would have destroyed in the East and been a playoff team, probably in the West. Like, that was a pretty good starting lineup.
To your point right there, Patrick, one thing worth noting that's very fascinating to me, if you look at the West, you look at the Warriors, the Spurs, and the Rockets, and actually the Jazz. God, I love the Jazz. Those 4 teams, currently, according to Basketball References SRS, which incorporates basically margin of victory incorporated with strength of schedule. Last I checked, I could be wrong, those 4 teams all had a better SRS than the top teams in the East. But of course, we've seen this show before where the West is just way, way stronger than the East, and somehow LeBron pulls a win.
Well, I mean, I think the fact that Kevin Love got injured
is going to play, I think. That Warriors-Spurs game wasn't as bad as that Bulls game Sunday.
And so what was the Bulls situation?
The Bulls game was horrible. That was a horrible game. The Bulls had like 30 points at halftime.
Well, yeah, I saw at one point the score was like 31-13. And it was one of the many. This is how I know the portfolio is doing really bad this year. It seems like every single time I have a game where like the team with the over is playing against the team with the under teams fucking always wins against the over team. It's like that double whammy. And I feel like there have been so many double whammy games this year. It's crazy. So it's it was. I looked at that score. I was like, what? 31-13. What are the Bulls doing? Did they not have any other players out there, or was it just a stinker?
I think they sat a lot of guys that game too.
So this is like an interesting thing in the NBA that I think is a bit of a problem. And I guess we talked about this over email. Like part of the problem is just the NBA scheduling, which they're going to address next year. But another problem is, I think, schedule differences aside, situations can always come up where it's going to be in one team's advantage, going to be to their advantage to rest their best players. But clearly that's never to the NBA as a whole's advantage, because that's going to be bad for ticket sales for that one game, or for TV ratings for that one game. Like, it has got to piss ESPN or ABC off what happened in that Spurs-Warriors game, because I'm sure.
Yeah, that was an ABC game.
I'm sure 6 weeks ago, ABC execs were looking at it and they're like, "This is the game we want to show on Sunday. This will be a blockbuster." And then come game time, and it's like terrible, right?
Yeah.
And that's got to be the kind of thing to piss off a partner that's as important as ABC is going to be a big deal. And I'm not sure all of the things that the NBA can do about it, but I do feel like there should be, even if it's the right decision for your team, I don't feel like it should be without consequences. Like, teams should have to, refund money or things like that, and maybe set up a system where, if you look at your top 5 minutes players, every time one of them sits, you have to do some kind of a rebate to your fans or something. I don't really know what we can do, but it does seem to be a powerfully bad reverse incentive from the NBA's perspective.
By the way, let's throw this out here too. This has always been a struggle in sports, where the NFL arguably is feeling this now, right? With Thursday night, Monday night, and Sunday night football, where you've got players that are just getting destroyed. And the argument I've heard, I'm not sure, because I really only watch the Packers in the playoffs, and that's because it's a social thing. People invite you over to parties. Before, Patrick, it's really easy during the regular season to kind of stand firm on the NFL is evil, et cetera, et cetera. And then when all of your friends on a Sunday are having pizza and beers, and you go, well, I can stand firm and not make a dent to this multi-billion-dollar industry, or I can actually see some friends I haven't seen in a while because I just had a kid. Obviously, the second one wins. But all I was going to say is, I've heard that the Thursday, Sunday, Monday night football kind of thing, especially with some schedules where you have teams that go Monday night to Thursday night, is just rough. And I've always missed the links, Brian. If you find one and throw it on the script, I'll put it in the show notes tomorrow. If not, I'll forget. But I'm fairly certain I've seen a few articles that have basically said the odds of injury increase on back-to-backs. And the NBA, has always had this issue with back-to-backs. In the lockout-shortened seasons, they had back-to-back-to-backs. And so the examples that are going to come up, the Spurs are in here twice. A few years ago, Greg Popovich rested all of his starters against Miami, and that's a huge game, right? Because that's a repeat of the finals. Obviously, people want to see that, but Popovich rests his starters. They fined him $250,000. Their reasoning was, actually, just so we're clear on this, that he didn't give them ample notice. Now, I'm going to say this as someone who periodically watches late news for basketball. There have been plenty of times where a player is not with a team, and that should have been easy to tell fans an hour or two earlier, and it's not announced until 15 minutes before game time. It is maddening. In this case, I think I put this in the email thread, we talked back and forth. That was very clearly a case of Stern going, Popovich is this asshole who routinely stands up to me, who badmouths reporters.
There's a lot of history before the fine, right, Dre?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Popovich is, I think, the only coach in the NBA who can get away with his attitude. I don't think maybe Phil Jackson back in his heyday on winning teams, but usually a coach can't be that dismissive towards authority as Popovich. So I think I was very clearly a commissioner coming down harshly because he had the ability to, not so much their reasoning actually being like that. But simple point at that point was, I think the Spurs had 4 games in 5 nights. So what you were saying, Patrick, I agree it's better for the fans, but if they want to do that, then they need to schedule better. And there's always that trade-off.
Yeah.
cramming more games in so you get more gate revenue, more TV revenue, versus a more lax schedule that could actually be good for players' health. And this has been around forever.
Well, and here's an interesting thing: that $250,000 fine is like, if you're some family father who saved up for, to get $300-400 to take your family to a game and had that happen to you, why do you give a fuck if Popovich had to pay the league $250,000? Like, why wasn't the decision, you can either pay us $250,000 or you can refund all your fans the ticket price? There should have been a choice like that, right? I don't feel like the customer is really benefiting from, if there's any rules that I would put into place, it would be rules that benefit the fans that get screwed over or the TV stations that get screwed over, and not like, who cares about the league doesn't need an extra $250,000 from one of its teams, right? Because it's clear that that's a revenue neutral thing, right? One team paying one team paying the other 29 teams some money isn't really benefiting anyone, right? Or hurting anyone.
They're padding their pockets, basically.
Oh, we got
Trey.
Oh, he's back. He's back.
Okay.
Wait, I was trying to do what you were saying pre-show, Brian. I was trying to jump in and say, Andrew, you talk. But
Skype went against you. I'm sorry.
Right, Andrew, I'll let you get the last word on this subject, then I'll move on to some of my.
Yeah, I was basically gonna echo what Patrick was saying and say that they're basically padding their pockets, and from a PR move, giving the money back to the fans would be the smarter move.
Yeah, although, I mean, you were saying patting their pockets, from a financial move, right? They get to say they did something. Silver, Stern, whoever can stand up and say, I took action, and nobody loses any money, because I think we've kind of discussed this before. The commissioner's job is usually in favor of the owners. It would have been a great thing, for instance, for Chris Paul to end up on the Lakers. That move by Stern was not done to benefit the league as a whole, because Chris Paul in Los Angeles is fantastic for the league. That was done because other owners bitched. All right.
Andre, I want to get in here real fast if I can on this. I'm sorry. I know I told you to interrupt me and everything, but no, I have a slightly alternate perspective from a competitive side. And so first of all, everything you guys are saying about putting the fans first, it's correct, right? That's what the league should be caring about for sure. But from a competitive perspective, I just want to put one note in there is I think it's really bad to be telling the coaches that they have to make a decision between competitive side and marketing side. I don't think a competitor like the coach should be making that decision. I don't think the league should be putting them into that spot. So here's kind of the perspective I'm coming from. So again, we broadcast here on Twitch TV, so we're supposed to be esports, but we're really not. We talk about real sports. And when I became an esports fan about 10 years ago, when the streaming revolution happened, my perspective coming into it was from, watching mainstream sports like we're talking about now, and then also, competitive card games, which were a little bit ahead of esports at the time, like Magic the Gathering. And in Magic, they would never make the players make that decision. So here's what I mean by that is if you're playing a game at a competitive match and there's money on the line and everything, and your opponent does something that's against the rules, it's not up to you to call them out on it. You just have to call a judge over, and the judge will make a decision on it. So the reason I bring that up is when I started watching esports, it was the opposite. In a lot of these tournaments, the admins and judges wouldn't have a lot of power, and they'd say, other player, it's your decision if you want to call out this competitor or not and put the rule on them. So either you can have a competitive advantage for yourself and call them out and put the rule on them. This is when they've broken a rule, right? Or you can say, no, I'm going to be a nice guy and I'm not going to call you on that rule. That's an impossible spot to be in, right? You have to either go against your own competitive side or you have to be nice to your opponent, which could benefit you in the future, right? I'm just saying you should never put competitors in that situation. And it's the same thing with coaches in the NBA. You shouldn't be putting Steve Kerr in a spot where he has to rest his players to be competitive. He should be able to have his players have the correct amount of rest and not have to make an anti-competitive decision in order to make the fans happy. So what I'm saying is the decisions that make the fans happy, that should be made above the competitive level. The competitors themselves should not have to make that.
Jump up to easily slam something we've slammed for years.
I was going to say, tell that to LeBron.
Well, he has multiple roles, so it's complicated.
But here's all I was going to say. I think the NBA has succeeded in spite of itself in many cases. So Patrick, something you and I love to bash is NBA League Pass, which I didn't sign up for this year. Actually, the NBA did a fantastic job marketing itself out of it for me, because what the NBA did is my credit card expired, so it didn't auto renew for League Pass. And I check the box scores every night. And this year, the NBA updated their web pages to be even worse for showing the box score. But I kept seeing this game is blacked out when I would click on NBA box scores. And so that happened enough where like every night, a quarter of the games would be blacked out for me. And so when I got an email that said, "Do you want to sign up for League Pass?" I said, "No, why the hell would I want to sign up for this product? You keep telling me on your site that sucks, that is running worse this year than it did last year, that I can't watch the games I might want to watch." And then additionally, you've told me, Patrick, is this right, that League Pass, like as a product, has gotten worse, and a bunch of people complain they like.
Oh yeah, it's way worse than it was last year. I mean, to the point that LeBron was complaining about it before the season began, right? So that the tables are like really almost impossible to read on your mobile phone because they're like big and clunky, and you have to scroll. But then when you try to scroll, like you end up accidentally clicking on things. There's a really ugly AdSense ad like right in the middle that totally destroys the branding experience from the NBA's perspective. It's terrible. And then, like you said, the blackout stuff is worse this year than it's ever been because of that TV contract. That the big giant TV contract means there are so many national games. Like Monday night, there's something on ESPN. Tuesday, there's something on TNT. Wednesday, there's something on ESPN. Thursday, there's something on TNT.
It's amazing from their part, which I've heard. Again, I haven't used the product, but when I bitched about it, what has happened is no one has come down and said, "Dre, it's a shitty product, but it's worth $20 a month," or whatever. People have just come on and yelled more. Apparently, if there is a League Pass game and you have NBA League Pass and there's like an NBA TV game and you have NBA TV, you can't watch them both on the same thing. So even if you
That's
pay,
correct.
you can watch. So what the you pay for?
It's stupid. It's the NBA treats the NBA TV as if it were an external network that has purchased the rights, and so you can no longer see it on League Pass. So the only people that it ever makes sense for to buy League Pass are. Well, there's two categories of people. One are like the junkies that just absolutely positively have to see every game, and they've got all the cable networks and shit so they can see anything that's on a live TV thing. But in addition, they just have to be able to see the 3 other games that they might be able to watch that night. Or two, people like me who are like displaced fans from somewhere else. Like they're like fans of some team, but they don't live anywhere near that state anymore. And so the only way they can see those games, the ones that aren't on national TV, is by buying League Pass. But so I did pay for it this year, but I'm never going to again. It's absurd. The price is crazy.
So that was a bit of a tangent, but the same thing, like it seemed really weird to me with NBA scheduling, and this is some data that I can't track down easily, but like I know for a fact that Kevin Durant has not been on as many national TV games as he should have been in his career. Just because of, and there have been some horrible media games, right? There's, Los Angeles, as it got worse and worse, would still get marquee billing from the NBA. So you'd be at the end of the season and there'd be a Los Angeles, there would be a Spurs Oklahoma City game that might decide a playoff spot when Durant was back there. That's not on a national TV game. But then there's some Los Angeles 76ers game where both teams are trying their best by sitting all their star players in the fourth quarter, and the fans aren't watching. So the NBA, with a lot of this stuff, I think has not done the smart maneuver. So when Brian's talking about it shouldn't be the coach's decision, I agree. And the NBA, you would think, would have the ability preseason, and we've said this about the NBA, you should be able to look and know where the stars are and at least try and make a more enjoyable TV schedule. But I don't know. It doesn't seem like they've done.
I mean, if they knew where the stars were, teams would be a whole lot better, but
They do. I mean, you can't tell me that Kevin Durant, MVP, and Russell Westbrook almost averaging a triple-double together isn't a better team to put on some national TV games than Los Angeles. That was a trivial decision last year, and they haven't done that. So, to your point, Patrick, and Brian, they absolutely shouldn't put teams in this case. It makes sense for teams to do it, but we've kind of seen the NBA make dumb decisions like this where I think they're just bad at scheduling. I'm not saying it's an easy problem, but I'm saying
baseball does it the best. I hear a lot of good things about baseball, their mobile stuff and all that. I pay for
their product. It's good.
Yeah.
All right. This was kind of just a discussion last week, Brian, that you and I had, where I kind of said I felt like I was taking crazy pills. So no real smooth
I don't
transition.
remember this.
But it was basically between Westbrook and Kawhi, because these are two.
Yeah.
Throughout all of Kawhi's career, we've said he's one of the best players in the league. He's great. He's amazing. It was not a fair trade for George Hill. Get out of here. The Spurs are awesome. Kawhi's amazing. That's what we've said. And, people have been like, he's overrated. And then we've said, or they've said, you're overrating him. He's not that good. He's a role player. Then we've said, Russell Westbrook's this overrated chucker. He's good, not great. What are people talking about? Now, this season, I'm going, Russell Westbrook's an MVP caliber player. And Kawhi is good. He's MVP caliber as well, but he did not have a jump this season. He is playing great. His points per game went up. But if you look at his production, if you look at his shooting efficiency relative to the league, if you look at the Spurs defense relative to the league, all of this stuff has kind of basically stayed flat or gone down a little. So what we're saying is he was an MVP player last year. He's an MVP player this year. But the people that are now, a bunch that we've seen various sources that say, Kawhi has had a breakthrough season. He's an improved player. He's turning into the man. And we're going, he's getting 5 more points a game. That's it. He's actually gotten worse.
Well, we're basically saying that he already was the man, right?
Yeah.
And this happens every year. Most of the time, the most improved player is a player who was already good and just got more minutes. It's like when Kevin Love won most improved player. It's like, you got to be kidding me.
Kawhi's just gotten a couple extra shots. The other thing that might be funny about that is Kawhi might just be getting a little bit more respect, because the biggest change to his game is he just gets to the line, I think, 3 or 4 more times a game. And I think takes like one or two more shots a game. So it's kind of like he's getting more free throws than he used to. But beyond that, his game is the same, not, like I said, a little, possibly even a little worse. When we,
I'm gonna say this from a casual fan's perspective. People look at him now as he has the aesthetic of a superstar now. Therefore, they think he's improved.
Yeah, I mean, that's
like statistically, he's the same basically, but the league got a little better.
His points have gone up, and we've said points make the world go round. But I think you're right. Where I think Tim Duncan leaving finally, that's always been an argument people have had. As long as Tim Duncan and David Robinson were on the Spurs, when we would use arguments that the Spurs were a good analytics team, when we use arguments that the Spurs were good at drafting, when we use arguments that the Spurs were moneyballing the league, people would basically come back with and just say they tanked to get the number 1 pick. So now that those guys are gone, and the Spurs are still near the top of the West, they're just going to go, well, it's Kawhi. Kawhi's a star. So that's fair, but it feels weird to say Kawhi is an MVP player, but he's overrated. And it feels weird for me to also say Russell Westbrook's an MVP player and he's underrated, because for years, Patrick, you've been doing the show for years now with me. We have said the exact opposite for like 3 years, and I don't know what's going on. It feels really weird.
Can we ask, when is Pop going to unleash Kyle Anderson?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the older guards, that has been something weird. I hate to be mean about this, but I do feel like Tony Parker has kind of held the Spurs back.
He hasn't been on the court. He's just been hurt.
Because he's a good player. But as long as he's getting that contract and he's a leader on that team, it's actually kind of similar to the Kobe problem. The Spurs have not quite been willing to move on from Tony Parker. Funny NBA history, they did offer Tony Parker for Chris Paul back in the day, and that would have been
it's the Dirk problem, basically. Like, Mark Cuban won't let go of Dirk.
Yeah, Dirk, Kobe, and to be fair, Tony Parker, I'll be mean to Dirk, who just passed 30,000 points, although he's actually shooting horribly this season despite some occasional good games. Kobe and Dirk got really, really bad. Brian, can you tell me really quick, is Tony Parker above average this season? He has been for the last couple.
No, I don't think so. I'll have to check it out, but just to talk more specifically about what we're saying here, this was spurred by an article on 538. I know we like to talk to them way too much, but it was called Kawhi Leonard's Rise to Superstardom. And the reason why I took issue with this is everything you were just saying, right? Is that he's taking more shots this year and scoring more points, but his overall production is about the same. And so what we said is, sure, he's a superstar. He just was in the past. Now, why do they think he's a superstar now? It's because he's taking worse shots, basically, and still making them. And therefore, that's valuable to the team. And that's where we start to take issue, right? As well, there's probably better shots to be taken. He just should keep taking them instead of taking bad shots now.
And that actually gets the last point I brought in the article, which is a fun one, which is Allen Iverson's a player we've bashed forever. in 2001, when he won the most valuable player, his true shooting percentage, which is, just accounting for threes and free throws, was exactly average. And again, I argue if a player's main skill is scoring and their scoring is league average, it's hard for me to consider that most valuable. But what was fascinating to me is if you were to take Allen Iverson's shooting in 2001 and look at it now in the NBA, it's worse than the worst team. The Orlando Magic, when I wrote the article, were the worst team in the NBA in regards to shooting efficiency. The entire team put together is better than Allen Iverson. And a lot of that is improvements in strategies. Teams are finally realizing three-point shots are effective. You should take three-point shots instead of mid-range shots. A guy over at Nylon Calculus that I butted heads with a few times even wrote an article saying that exact point. Shocker, three-pointers are better than mid-range jumpers. Who knew? Sorry. But so our point being there can be inflation on shooting efficiency, because I found that fascinating that a 2001 shooting efficiency team would get creamed even by some of the worst 2001 shooting efficiency teams this year. So to Kawhi's point, he's taking harder shots, like you said, but that's actually not as good as 538 is making out to be, because the league is getting wise and getting better on efficiency. So it's actually a bad thing to say he's taking harder shots, but they're still going in, when you go, yeah, but the rest of the league is caught on and is taking more efficient shots and they're going in.
No, that's right. I love it. And Andrew and Patrick, I'd love to hear what you guys think about this. But Kawhi Leonard's been a great player for years. I just don't see why all of a sudden he's a superstar.
Well, Patrick has to go in 15 minutes, so I'm going to cheat and use the Spurs to get a topic we were talking about. I've got to get a little bit on air, Patrick, because I was loving all you're saying. For those of you who don't know Patrick's pedigree, he was a basketball coach in Germany. Like we've joked before, this close to being a professional coach. Patrick, how do you want to?
I have actually been paid to coach before.
Okay, so not okay, so high level. So
that's professional.
In the realms of
getting paid. Come on,
we're talking hundreds of dollars per month.
But if we were going to put you on the scale of basketball coaches, where would you put yourself when you coached overseas in Germany?
I don't really know how to answer that question.
All right,
to the bottom, I'm sure.
All right. So, but anyway, regardless, you've done coaching. So the weird topic I want to talk about is defense, and the reason this came up is a couple of years ago, Arturo and myself, and I think you were actually near the Sloan, Patrick, but you didn't have a ticket in. But we went to Sloan, and there was a paper by a guy named Kirk Goldsberry, who actually works for the Spurs now, about defense. And what was fascinating about this paper is it really bashed David Lee. Had these really beautiful heat maps that said David Lee is horrible at defense. I think Ethan Sherwood-Strauss actually got in an interview with David Lee where David Lee had to go, what the blank do you want from me? I'm getting these stats. I'm an all-star. Like, I'm doing what they pay me for. Why are you mad at me? I'll point out, Brian, that the Warriors have not won an NBA Finals without David Lee. Just saying. So anyway,
true.
David Lee is now on the Spurs, and in fact, he's getting major minutes. He's as of now, he's gotten over 1,200 minutes on the Spurs. He's playing great according to our numbers, and Arturo was doing some numbers that he American numbers on Twitter was doing some numbers. I just want to make sure the handle's out there, where he was saying, here's the defense, and lo and behold, David Lee actually looks good on defense. And also note, David Lee has played in the most games of the Spurs, tied with Patty Mills. They both played 65. So the surprising thing to me was David Lee's now on a team with Kirk Goldsberry, because Kirk Goldsberry works for the Spurs. The Spurs are number one in the NBA at defense, and David Lee is playing major minutes and playing great. I just scratched my head and said, it's really weird the amount of statistics that people try and come up with for individual defense. And how I'm not saying that there aren't good individual defense players, but it's really odd that people kind of discount how much of defense is a collaborative team activity and how it's really, really hard to pin down how good a defender a player is, because you have to put that in the context of the team they're on. And you had some thoughts on that, Pat.
Well, I mean, initial thought is like when we've done a lot of analysis of coaching and how coaches affect their players. And for the most part, the answer is coaches don't make players all that much better. The primary influence that coaches have is choosing which players to play. Except, of course, team defense. There it seems to be that coaches actually make a significant difference. Like, there are differences between the good coaches and the bad coaches in terms of improving a team's defense. And we're talking about like one coach taking over for another coach and with the same players achieving a better, defense. And it's because a lot of it's around schemes. Like it's a lot of it's around strategy, and a lot of it is getting players to buy into strategies. And one of the things we talked about in the pre-show is that the classic sort of Goldsberry method of who protects the rim best seemed to be the gist of it seemed to be more or less, well, who was standing close to the rim when the guy with the ball took a shot. And as we were talking about, that's not actually a very good description of rim defense at all, because any coach will tell you rim's defense starts on the perimeter, right? The easier it is for a guard to penetrate past his perimeter, the better his chance of finishing at the rim is going to be, because now the better angle he has to the rim, the more momentum he has going to the rim. Like if you get bumped on your way to the rim, it's hard to elevate and get a good shot off. If you don't get bumped, it's going to be easier, et cetera, et cetera. So just saying, okay, David Lee happened to be standing near the rim when player X scores isn't a really great way of measuring either David Rim's defense or the Warriors' defense as a whole. And I'm saying the Warriors because that's the time, right?
Same paper that Kirk Goldsberry did that bashed David Lee, he brought up another point, which is some players, he brought up Dwight Howard, are good at, in his argument, keeping players out of the protected area, keeping players out of the paint, which might be true. But then to what you're saying there, you don't know if that's Dwight Howard being an awesome defender and keeping people from getting in the paint, or if the Magic or Lakers or Rockets or Hawks defense, wow, Dwight Howard's played for a surprising number of teams now, given that he started for one for so long. But yeah, you can't tell. It's harder for you to pin down, is Dwight Howard good at keeping his man away from the basket, or are the perimeter players better at that? And I mean, a great example for me from my past is Andre Iguodala on the Nuggets. Everybody kind of says, and I think I agree, that Andre Iguodala is a great perimeter defender, but the Nuggets defense with him was never that spectacular. He goes to the Warriors, though, and the Warriors have the number one D in the league with them, I believe. I think they have it, if not them, the Spurs. And it makes a lot more sense that Andre Iguodala next to other players like Draymond Green and Klay Thompson, who are better at guarding the perimeter, can be a good defense, where that individual skill, which might be a great individual defense skill of Andre Iguodala's, does not translate as well if the team isn't able to work with it.
Well, and then, okay, so here's the thing. You say that Iguodala is the best perimeter defender. What that, of course, means is that Iguodala has to defend against the best offensive player, right? So that it becomes really hard to measure how good you're at defense when every night you're defending a guy like LeBron James, because no matter how good at defense you are, that other guy is so good that it's probably going to make your defense look bad. There was a really great, and I think it's from about a year and a half ago, there was a really great highlight reel from Coach Nick about why Steph Curry is a great defender. And one of the great points he made is that no matter who you pick in the NBA, you can cherry pick highlights to make that player look like a terrible defender, because NBA players are just that fucking good, right? Well, you're playing against
fame initially, right? He crossed over Michael Jordan, and that was like the first big play that made his name. Sorry to
no, I mean, so NBA players, and not just LeBron James, but all kinds of NBA players are that good with the ball. Even the best defenders, you're going to be able to find clips where they get made to look like fools. And if you cherry pick those clips, it's easy to make players look like poor defenders. I mean, I think James Harden is a particularly egregious victim of this. Although I'll say there probably are some clips of him just not even trying, which is worse. But I think it's just not that simple to say player X is a great defender because other players average these kinds of numbers against them, right?
Well, I want to jump in here. We're specifically talking right now, just to be clear, is this what we're talking about? The charts that Arturo's been putting up on Twitter today, which are based...
But then in general, Brian, so...
what are we addressing here? That's my question.
So what I'm saying is, when people discuss individual defense, and so the reason I harken back to not Coach Nick, to Kirk Goldsberry, is that was one thing he did. And then you always do this to me, Brian. You throw up charts or things, and there are lots of good analysts of some of their work. My MO, and this includes people at the Boxscore, Geeks, and Wages of Wins. I agree with some of what smart people say, and then I disagree with a lot too, because I am just a difficult person.
I'm going to show one of his charts then, because I thought it was interesting. I wanted to see what you guys thought about it.
So here's the point. American Numbers is the Twitter handle to follow. Put up some charts about the good defense of like the Spurs, the Jazz, and the Miami Heat, and basically said, here's how bad the opposing C plays. And then to the Kurt Goldsberry charts from the thing back in the day, you won't have a link to them, Brian. I'll try and remember for the script. He shows these heat maps of David Lee's defense at the rim. And both of these are trying, and the way both of these were presented is how I should say it, is to say Rudy Gobert and Hassan Whiteside are great at defense.
Right.
David Lee is at defense. And I'm saying you can't know for sure that it is David Lee's bad defense that lets the Warriors get lit up at the rim. I actually did a follow-up piece on David Lee where I just noted teams that the reason the Warriors were bad at defense back in the day with David Lee seemed to be that teams just took a lot of threes against them because they thought they were bad at threes. Even though they were good at defending threes, it's kind of ironic. Teams took threes at the Warriors at a worse rate than the league, but they took a higher rate of threes, so it was actually a net positive, kind of pre-Morey ball discovery by the league there. And then, the same point to saying, wow, Rudy Gobert is really shutting down the opposing center. Maybe. And he probably, the numbers I've looked at suggest that Rudy Gobert is a great defender, but I'm not giving, it's really hard to tie down. That's what you're saying, Patrick. It's really hard to tie down. Is this all Rudy Gobert, or is George Hill a great perimeter defender? Are the other bigs, there have been some other good bigs on Utah, though they've been decimated recently. Are some of the other bigs on Utah being really good at help? I find people are far too quick to try and pin down individual defense. And the only reason this kind of came up as a subject this week for me is because, David Lee popped into my head and I said, isn't it kind of funny that this player that in the advanced stats analytics community a few years ago was the punching bag and the poster child for bad defense is now a cornerstone of a team that's playing the best defense in the league?
Given all of the randomness of this whole defense and individual defense conversation, the chances of Arturo or anybody able to identify, this guy is a great defender, the odds are not high. So say Andre Iguodala for once, if he can block LeBron James every time LeBron shoots, there's a zero certainty that ball is going in because he's blocked it. But if he doesn't, there's still a chance, no matter how close, no matter how draped over he is over LeBron, there's still a chance that the ball's going in. Yeah, now, the closer he gets, the odds go down. But I don't know how they're identifying a contested shot. Like, how what's the feat? How close do you have to be for it to be, okay, this is a contested shot?
Yeah, and that, by the way, the NBA started to keep this data, but the rough part is, as you're pointing out, they have like a similar to Boxscore thing that says contested field goals. But like you're saying, we've talked this about Steph Curry. There are shots that look contested to Steph Curry that I'm sure if you talk to Steph Curry, he goes, "Are you kidding? I had half a millisecond. I was wide open." And there are shots I'm sure that look wide open to various players that aren't used to shooting threes that you go, how did you not take a better shot? And they go, are you kidding? The guy was charging right at me. I didn't have any time. So it's really hard to know what contested if it's just by proximity and doesn't take those other factors into account.
And you also hear commentators say, well, okay, that was great defense, but that was better offense. So it's still great defense.
That's right.
Like,
All right. So Patrick, you've got 4 minutes. I don't think we're going to be able to hit a lot of NCAA. I did cheat and use like half of it.
I was also going to bring up something that Patrick brought up about offenses and how they're geared to single out bad defensive players. So
right, that's a big deal, right?
If the offense is simultaneously doing that while the defense is trying to keep the best defender on that offensive player, how are you able to separate these things? And there's only the most division time. The division games are 4 games. Then you have cross conference games. That's 2, maybe 3 games. It's so noisy. If you break it down, it's so noisy to be able to parse out that this guy is a great defender.
100% agree. So I was going to say, Patrick, you said you've got about 3 minutes. So is there any topic you would like to end up? We can do NCAA, we can do anything else, but I figure I'd let you get the last subject. We'd finish with that, and then maybe go to shout-outs.
Well, actually, I all I have is a shout-out, so I'll just wait for shout-outs then.
All right, Andrew, anything you want to say? The funny thing about NCAA, I think Patrick said you just cribbed off of 538 for your bracket. My bracket currently exists of a relative of mine pinged me on Facebook and asked for bracket help, and I have rudely not gotten back to them. And all I would say is I have no idea.
I will say I made two very important adjustments to 538.
All right, what do we got?
Oh, good.
I have Gonzaga winning it all. Sorry, Kansas winning it all. Kansas beating Gonzaga in the final. And I think 538 bracket has Villanova winning it all. Yeah. But I mean, just barely, right?
Well, there,
and then there was a matchup in the beginning that was like a 6 seed against an 11 seed where 538 was like 51-49. So I was like, well, then fuck, I'll take the 11 seed, right?
Patrick, Neil Payne's headline says Villanova is a weak favorite and Wichita State is dangerous on 538. There you go.
And
I don't think I picked Wichita State for anything past the first round.
Arturo had Gonzaga as his favorite for his model. He had him pick Gonzaga. And I had Gonzaga too, but I basically I compared ESPN's BPI metric and efficiency differential, and I compared the two. And any close games, I would just roll a dice, and whatever team had the highest thing. And I
mean, it's so hard.
The best teams, right? The best teams only have maybe a 15% chance at the best.
Second best is like 14, then 13. Yeah,
but it's so hard to even say, okay, this team's better than this team, because they all have completely different strength of schedules, right? I mean, because the reality is
the sample size.
Yeah. The reality is, even aside from sample size, most teams just don't play other ranked teams very often in the course of a season, and some divisions are obviously tougher than others. But I mean, you never know. Like maybe Gonzaga is not as good as they look, right? Because of who they play.
Or you have a situation where you have an expectedly good team that just haven't had a bad night because it's one game.
And anything can happen in single elimination. That's the huge part. So
So there are no wrong brackets, people. There are no wrong brackets.
Yes.
Unless you pick all the 16 seeds to go all the way.
Okay.
UC Davis, they're going. They're doing it. Go Aggies. They're playing right now in the play-in game.
All right, so I was going to say, Patrick, let's just go to shout-outs. You'll do your shout-out. I have one. We'll see if Andrew and Brian, if you have any shout-outs, get them in your head. Get them locked and ready to go. So, Patrick, what do you got?
My shout-out is to Jason Concepcion for an absolutely delightful article at The Ringer called Does the Ball Lie? A Review, in which he analyzes how players play, how they perform after perceived bad calls. And one of his conclusions is that Rasheed Wallace was so much worse after he got a technical foul than he was before he got a technical foul, which is kind of, and I mean, it's on one part it's kind of amusing, but on the other part it's actually really interesting data. Like it's kind of one of those things that coaches tell you all the time. It's like, you got to cool down. You're not going to play better when you're all emotional like this, right? You got to cool down. And he just put some real numbers to it. And when you look at the numbers next to each other, it's kind of amazing how much worse Rasheed was after technical fouls per 36 minutes than he was before technical fouls per 36 minutes.
It's probably why Cousins is so bad.
That could be a topic for a whole another podcast. Is like how bad was Rasheed Wallace simply because he had 41 technicals in a season? Because if you think about what 41 technicals in a season do to your team's chance of winning, you have to be really good to make up for that. And I don't think he was anywhere near that good. That's one of those records that's never going to be broken, right? 41 Ts in an NBA season? No way. That's going to be up there with like Wilt's record of playing more than 48 minutes per game.
Well, never say never, but I'd agree. All right, what I was gonna my shout out is to the film Stripped, which is a documentary about online comics and print comics, like in newspapers. So not like comic books, like the little leaflet things you see, the Garfields, the Dilberts, etc. And just kind of how the internet media changed a lot of that, and how just the medium for being a cartoonist, for drawing comics, has changed dramatically. It's a fantastic documentary. It's one of my favorites. They did a Kickstarter for it, and since that Kickstarter have had a bunch of success with awards and stuff. The reason I throw that out that is, if you are a Kickstarter backer, I shouldn't say this because it hurts my own chances, but it's so great I want to promote it. They have a deal going on for March 20th. So you want to be by your computer March 20th. You want to check your Kickstarter emails if you've got any kind of a filter that sends those. If you backed the Stripped film on Kickstarter, you want to check that out because they're being amazing to their fans. But I did want to throw that out because at this point it's everywhere. I think you can get it on all the VODs. I did VHX, which was really nice because it includes special features. Can't say enough good things about that, and had to give a shout out to it this week.
Okay, my shout out goes to LeVar Ball, just for being just for being a great dad. Like
yeah,
a lot of their parents cared that much about their future endeavors.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, I really hope for everybody that at some point in their life they care about anything as much as LeVar Ball cares about the future of his child in the NBA.
And he kicked Marcellus Wiley's ass.
Oh yeah, all three are going to be NBA players.
Oh yeah.
No, my shout out is just to you guys. We had a full show this week, which is awesome. Great job, Dre, hosting and keeping us in line. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
All right, well, that's been our show. We've been the Boxscore Geeks. If you found us not through the website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. You can subscribe and upvote us. We are on iTunes and Stitcher, The Boxscore Geeks Show. We go live every week, usually around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually Tuesday or Wednesday. We actually did it this week. Go us. Usually run a day or two if three or more of us are going to be on a show. So we did it. You can catch recaps, channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. And then, of course, it's twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers if you want to catch the live show. I've been your host, Dre Alvarez, a.k.a. Nerd Numbers. Co-host, Patrick Minton. You can find on Twitter as NBA Geek. Andrew Sutton, who you can find in internet comment sections as Andrew Sutton. And then, of course, Voice of God, Brian Foster, our producer, who you can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Have a good week, and we'll see you next time.